But now we want to turn on to something else, and let's talk about gas. Kenya has proven gas reserves off the coast of Lamu and around the county of Samburu. But we don't have so much, or we don't hear so much about these. What do you know that we don't?
Well, I know as much as you do.
I don't know how much you think I know. Maybe I know nothing.
What I know is Zarara Oil and Gas, who were the holders of the Block L4 and L13 concession of partly onshore and partly offshore, were drilling for, or rather exploring for gas. However, this was not to be successful. What the reports that we were able to get as well was that there were no proven reserves that you'd quantify as commercial quantities for this gas to be upscaled for commercial purposes. So that was left at that. I think now they are planning to go onshore and explore for the same. But we have companies such as BGP Shell that undertook the very first drilling on Pate, the Pate 1 well pad in the late 70s, and for them, I think they were prospecting for gas, for crude oil. They got gas and abandoned the well, and hence the interest to undertake further exploration. I know ENI was also intended, or was rather prospecting for the same. We are waiting to hear the big announcement. Hopefully, they actually confirm that they are proven commercial quantities, and at least the shift can move away a bit from Turkana. For other parts, of course, we've had cases in Kajiado, where the National Corporation of Kenya is exploring, where borehole drill, the guys who drill boreholes have struck gas. However, government has come back again to say that there are further studies that are being undertaken. So in terms of gas, we are still in the dark as to where we would be. But of course, if there is crude oil, there is definitely gas. And for South Lokicha, one of the things that they've planned is rather than flare the gas, they'll reinject the gas, and hence that's why we are seeing the increase in quantities from 560 million to 585 million barrels of crude oil. Yes.
Laura, how long do you see us taking before we can start using our own gas?
How long? Well, that depends on exploration. The exploration to appraisal phase takes a while. I know you had alluded it to take almost 8 years. That is very conservative. Sometimes can actually take usually between 1 to 5 plus appraisal, 4 to 10. That makes almost 15 years. So it can take up to 15 years, and depending also on the geotechnical challenges or socio-political challenges, can actually take to 20 years in places like where is it? DRC. There's Total did make some finds, and by the time it was reaching FID for those finds, it was almost 20 years later. So it really just depends on how the exploration process goes, how well they're able to get commercially viable quantities, and if that can be produced at the ongoing market price, as well as with the available technology of that time. But I think there's a lot of work being done, as you alluded, by National Oil also, in terms of securing our national gas reserves in Kajiado and also within the north. So depending on how quickly that process goes and how they're able to determine and assess that it is economically viable, then I believe then we should be able to get the gas. But then that is really relatively dependent on the findings.
And the fact that Kenya has discovered oil, has proven commercial discoverability of oil. I mean, there's also a pointer that we must be having some gas, somewhere. Why is it so hard, just to pinpoint where exactly this gas is?
It has to do with, like I said, the geotechnical challenges, and this is something most geologists will tell you. You might find that a particular reservoir is disjointed, so the flow of gas gets blocked. It can't, like, when you look at the cracks within the rocks, they're not joining, so flow of gas cannot go if you're trying to extract it. So there could be that aspect, which sometimes that's what ends up making people abandon the process altogether, because it becomes very expensive, and also you get pressure from, of course, environmental groups, because one thing you'd have to do, you'd maybe want to take fracking as a consideration to increase or enhance recovery of the gas from that reservoir. Yeah.
Let's now talk about the mining industry. I mean, with the new mining act that came into force in 2016, we are yet to attract another big miner like base titanium. Yet we have proven gold reserves, in Nyanza. Why is this the case?
We do have Shanta Gold. Shanta Gold are equally
but that's
not as small. Well, relatively, but I don't think they are small.
Would you compare them with company like base titanium, for example?
Would I? I think it depends on the way Kenyans have decided to look at it, because of the scale of operations that's happening in Kwale. But I think depending on the reserves that Shanta is able to get, and I think also the other players that have come in recently within Migori, we can be able to realize that these guys can be put at the forefront. We did put Talo on a very big pedestal, equally to the stage of almost as big as BP. But you did realize that in comparison, yes, they were the biggest player here in Kenya because they are willing to commit a lot of money, but in terms of globally, they were relatively smaller. So I think it just depends on how you want to look at it. There's bigger companies that base titanium. BHP is quite big, but nobody gets to, it depends on where you're looking at it. Yes.
Do you agree with her?
I totally do. I think when base titanium came and began exploiting the mineral resources in Kwale, we were really excited, and I think so far we have actually have received really good revenues from the activities in Kwale. Yet again, I'll take you back to my previous point. It all depends on the state of the nation, the political regime that's in place, the policy architecture that's in place, the contracts that are needed to be entered into, the licenses that these companies need. Because some of these companies at times want to come and actually prospect for hydrocarbons or mineral resources, but they come, they are like, okay, we cannot venture into Kenya because we are not able to adhere to some of the provisions that the country requires. So they end up moving to other places that fit their context. So it also depends, but we have a lot of artisanal small-scale mining across the country.
And just to chime in on that, I think also the institutional framework.
Yes.
So there's yet to be operationalized the National Mining Corporation, and I think with that we should be able to see much more interest, because one of the mandates it needs to do is also promote investment within the mining sector, something like what NOC does. It goes around and tries to attract investment into the sector. So maybe with the operationalization of the NMC, we might be able to see much more investment into the mining sector.
I know, and this is something that I've engaged with the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining, and they're saying that they're still setting up structures to operationalize NMC. But do you think it is taking a bit longer than it would be anticipated?
Well, it's relative, considering that we have it anchored in the act that's fairly new. I don't think we've even completed the drafting of other subsequent regulations. So yes, we need it as early as yesterday, but yet again, it also depends on factors such as, for instance, this is an election year. area. So a lot of these processes will have to kind of take a back seat so that at least we pave way for the new political regime that is going to come into place. And hopefully we see that political regime also taking some of those issues into action. Yes.
Look, I mean, in the last 5 years, I mean, we have seen the company that was mining diatomite and fluorspar, closed down the operations. And we're also seeing, some challenges with Tata that is doing soda ash in Magadi, also going through some challenges. Is it that, our operating environment is really harsh, or these companies, were not structured to compete in a highly globalized and competitive market, Laura?
Well, yes and no. Yes, because when you look at the power costs, they're relatively high, and some of these mining operations are really power intensive. So for the ones who are trying to maintain their operations, like you saw what Bamburi did, they are making announcements and making plans to incorporate renewable energies into their operation to kind of reduce the power cost, which ultimately will reduce the cost of manufacturing whatever the product they're manufacturing. So I think there's that element which kind of slows down in terms of the cost of manufacturing. But I think also in terms of the global demand for this for these products might be waning, and that's why we're seeing also decreased activity, but maybe over time when this become because the commodities market is very volatile, if this then rebound, then you might see much more being put, much more restructuring of these companies, and much more output. Yes.
You talked about artisanal mining, and there was a time when there was a spirited effort to try and bring artisanal mining, to try and formalize artisanal mining by bringing them together, forming societies and cooperatives. These days we don't hear so much of this. What exactly happened?
Well, I think it all depends with how they're organized, because their organization is what is going to determine how they're going to reap the benefits from the sector. I know quite a number of civil society organizations that are actually really trying to bring together these artisanal miners to do that. However, these guys are there to get whatever they can from the ground, sell it and make whatever money they can make. And hence, it becomes not so much of a priority, where considering that it's something relatively recent that we, as a country, we are trying to take into effect. So we are seeing that happen. Probably when we do an audit within the next decade, for instance, we shall have seen more and more uptake of such beneficiary groups organizing themselves in order to reap more from the sector itself. Yes.
Why do you think the artisanal mining in Kenya is highly disintegrated in this country?
Well, I think it first of all depends on the resource that you're mining as an artisanal miner. For instance, artisanal miners in Migori who are getting into mines and using their tools to prospect for gold. You get there's competition from some slightly bigger companies that are coming to also act as brokers in order to reap something. So by the time you get the artisanal miners getting the say, for instance, if it's gold, to the time it actually gets to the market, it's gone through a number of it's like a chain, a number of people who also want to benefit from it. The brokers in the middle will want a percentage and will want to get that gold at the least value in order for them to sell at the most value. And for them, again, you get that these are not just people like you and me who can actually sit in boardrooms. These are people who are living slightly, we can actually say, below the poverty line. These are people who are just trying to get this resource and sell it so that they can actually get something to eat and clothes and just the bare minimums, the basic needs. And so for them, it's not really something that they are keen on. But and also, if you think about it, how many, for instance, as government, has government taken a step to actually sensitize these artisanal miners on provisions in the Mining Act? No, that's actually something that's being taken up by civil society organizations. So there still is a gap, and it's for now all the players to now figure out how to narrow that bridge.
Do you believe that the market, the artisanal mining market in this country, has been cartelized?
I will let engineer go.
Because I can see
that is a question I did not want to answer because it is a highly political question. It's like asking about the transport sector.
I read your mood. Please don't ask that.
It's like asking about the transport sector. Yeah. Do you think the transport sector is highly cartelized? And you're thinking, well, maybe. Maybe it could be cartelized. I think what Muturi
alluded. The ground. What does it say?
Well, of course, there's a competition of the brokers, which I think they would like to keep the status quo because it does bring benefit to them. But also, like Muturi mentioned, when you go down to the ground for artisanal scale miners, they just want to try and get the basic goods. They just want to put food on their table, clothing. So that could be the reason. But I think there could be a lot that could be done in terms of sensitizing, even on because I know the process for applying for mineral licenses, even including ASM, has been put online. Maybe there could also be that aspect of trying to just sensitize on not only the provisions, but also how to use, for instance, the portal or the mining cadastre. Yeah.
When you look at this market, I mean, we have seen, like for example, in Migori, there was the Kilima Pesa company that was almost striking it big, but somehow they pulled back. And when you talk to them, they will tell you that there are some dominant forces on the ground who are not very, very interested in seeing big players, coming into the market and trying to bring some form of order into this market. And so the question comes, then how do we streamline these operations and ensure that we get better organized players in our gold fields in Migori?
Well, first and foremost, I think when it comes to the Mining Act, it does provide for rather sort of cushioning some of those elements. However, as a country, we are known to develop amazing laws. Implementation becomes a problem, and so we see such scenarios where some of the say middlemen or the small scale miners themselves feel like this is going to be a disruption to their ecosystem, considering that as a company, of course, you're coming with heavier machinery, better technologies to exploit these mineral resources, and hence if you come and actually mine where I'm used to getting my daily bread, then you cause a sort of a disruption. You upset the status quo. Hence, a lot of people will not want that. It's, for instance, me coming and sitting on your seat and directing the news. It becomes, I do not have the expertise. But of course, for some of these companies, then it becomes a scenario that government needs to ensure that it actually operationalizes the act itself. And also in terms of the devolution process, there's a reason why we have the counties and they have the power to develop county laws. If it's a county and these mineral resources are there, then of course, if you feel that this is something that is really affecting the exploitation of these mineral resources, then there are certain measures that you can actually do that. But we also are yet to see that proper goodwill from the devolution process.
And I like that you brought that up, because we are having some laws and regulations which are at the national level but do not speak at the county level. So we might want to see how we can translate that at the county level, so that both national and county level, they're speaking almost the same language. Yes.
So where do you see the disconnect? Who is not willing to talk to who? Is it the national government that is not willing to engage with the county government, or the county governments are not willing to engage the national government, to try and harmonize that communication platform?
That is a fairly political question. I don't think.
And I also know that you are fairly politicized.
But I think to an extent you can kind of see a bit of that happening. Of course, communication between national and county levels might not be necessarily for the extractive sector, but for other priorities that get to intersect between national and county level. Yes.
Short and brief, let's now talk about coal. And we all have the history of Mui Basin, and even people went to China, for benchmarking mission. They came back and big announcements were made that finally Kenya was about to start mining and export of coal. That was in 2011, and that was then. What happened?
Energy transition. That is shifting priorities. You're seeing also there's we're trying to balance the challenge of being able to produce from our fossil fuel natural resources, and also trying to meet the global climate change priorities. So I think there's been that pressure also, of course, from both civil society organizations as well as the communities about the impacts. And that's why you see even in places like Lamu, the coal power plant could not proceed because there was pressure from the community and the civil society organizations that this would kind of harm the ecosystem that is within that area. So there's that, and also the energy transition, just trying to balance what needs to be done.
She's bringing in the issue of the civil society, coming in and strongly saying, no, this is not a project that we are very keen to see it taking off the ground. But a lot of these civil societies or NGOs are Western-backed. At what point do we say, yes, we have heard you, but this is about us as a country?
Well, it's difficult to place that expectation on civil society because a lot of the agenda items that are driven on the ground are experienced by Kenyans who are actually in the front seat. Normally, I would say it's actually a bit of a perception that these Westerners come with an ideology that CSOs need to push. For instance, with the coal project, the community itself is the one that actually, through support of civil society organizations from up and around Kenya, actually looked at the environmental and social impact assessment study. I was actually part of the very first organizations that had a chance to review that ESIA, and the recommendations that we actually gave, the communities went further to actually, hold press conferences and agitate as a voice, because first of all, looking at Lamu is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Second of all, it's an area of high biodiversity. Even with the Lamu Crude oil pipeline and setting up the Lamu Marine Terminal, it's going to ignite a lot of reaction from civil society organizations. And the role of civil society is not just to wake up in the morning and make noise on a particular issue. it's normally a well-organized information, because nowadays CSOs are applying evidence-based mechanisms to ensure that they actually are able to undertake comparative analysis when it comes to infrastructure development vis-a-vis impact on environment, both the environment as well as social. So, for instance, for Lamu people, the huge percentage rely on tourism and fisheries as a source of livelihood. So you introduce a coal power plant within the area, then you disrupt that entire ecosystem that is there. Lamu,
actually, I mean, when you look at the economy of Lamu, and
yes.
when you look at the contribution of tourism,
yes.
It has definitely, I mean, come down because of security fears around that region. And one of the NGOs that has been on the front line is the Save Lamu.
Yes.
And if we had listened to Save Lamu, we would not be having the port of Lamu even today, because they went to court, they had their grounds, but the court said no, this project has to continue. And so, I mean, at what point do we as a country say, yes, we have heard the voices of the minority, but this is a grand plan for this country? And yes, and this is something that we have to fly with.
Yeah, if I may come in, I think the best way to solve that is for each country, let's say for Kenya, to come up with its own energy transition plan that speaks to its local priority that fits also within maybe the African continent, because the pressure is coming up. But when you look at, for instance, in Kenya, I think 70 to 90% of our energy comes from renewable.
Absolutely,
so we're
85%.
we're doing really, really well. So I think we need to have our own energy transition plan that says maybe we can try and invest in coal a little bit, once we do the feasibility studies, to kind of what environmental impact will this have. If we find that is not too much, then we can proceed with that. I think right now, you can see globally, each individual country is making its own energy transition plan. I think it's time for Africa to make maybe one regional energy transition plan that also does not compromise the development of the natural resources sector, because we only contribute only 2% of to the global
green gas emissions.
But also having local in-country energy transition plans, because Kenya cannot have a similar energy transition plan as Uganda, because we're well ahead in terms of our renewable energy. Similarly, Uganda cannot have a similar with Tanzania because of also the natural resources. So I think that will really go a long way in helping solve the challenge of can we still also have our voice in developing some of our natural resources, which might not be favorable to the global scale.
And actually, you know, even before you respond, you know, when Kenya was in talks with China, to start, mining of coal, this was not for domestic use. I mean, it was for export to China. And, China was saying that they were going to mine using the latest technology that is also being used in Germany, which is one of the most greenest economies in the world. But somehow, the civil society was strong enough to go to court and stop this project. So at what point do we look at the interest of the civil societies and the national interest of Kenya?
Well, to respond to that, I think there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance in terms of are we going to exploit a particular resource within a sector at the detriment of other sectors. That is one. Second of all, again, beyond the civic space, rather, global conversations that we've actually seen. The conversation has been around decarbonization, reduced emissions, and all that. And it's high time, because the world itself is getting to a place where if we actually cross that line, the chances of going back will be close to nil. Hence, there has to be someone who stands and raises their voice to say, this we in as much as this development is going to support a particular sector, the overriding issue, which is global, say for instance, restoration and ensuring that the environment is actually taken into consideration, that happens. And that's why you're seeing, for instance, even with the East Africa crude oil pipeline, in Museveni's remarks, he talked about civil society organizations going to sleep in bushes there. So, but it's a valid concern because part of the exploration that's going to happen is in the Murchison Falls National Reserve. So, do you want to say that the petroleum sector is going to, we are going to put away the tourism sector and concentrate on the petroleum sector?
I mean, it's a question of striking a balance.
A balance.
Yes, but yet again, you know, we have these things that have been there, and we've experienced them with other jurisdictions, the resource costs, and this is how it happens, and that's why I feel that the civic space, especially for civil society players, is quite key, and it's just taking those recommendations and finding a neutral platform where, you know, stakeholders can actually engage and come up with a way forward. Yes.
And the question that has always been asked is what makes you know, the civil society believe that they have the best interest of the nation at heart more than the ruling regime, for example?
Well, first of all, and I'll go back to oil and gas. If we are actually to get to production and, you know, sell the oil, one of the things we're looking at is how are we going to get the revenues? Second of all, where are we going to spend these revenues? You know, and so the civil society come to sort of shake things up a bit by, you know, having those uncomfortable conversations. Okay, so we are going to make 10 billion from oil and gas. Don't you think that we need to have a sovereign wealth fund to put that money because of, you know, generational aspects, development and the likes? This I think for Kenya, we are seeing those conversations happen. I think again, going back to the Kenya Petroleum Technical Assistance Project, it provided a very good platform where government agencies, communities and civil society and also private sector were actually able to come up together and actually talk about some of these issues. So that is definitely something can happen, but again, it also depends with the jurisdiction. For Uganda, of course, the civic space is not as the same as the Kenyan space.
Yeah, I think Kenya has done well. Kenya has done well in terms of collaborating within the 4 key actors, including the 5th, who's academia, in terms of just engaging in a meaningful way. And we look forward to seeing that continuing to happen even within the next few years. In
30 seconds, where do you see you know, the Kenyan extractive industry in the next 5 years, by the year 2027?
Well, I look forward to it growing. I definitely look forward to it growing. And looking forward to FID. I'm just extrapolating to what has happened in Uganda. Hoping and praying that similar thing happens in Kenya, because it almost has the similar players that were in Uganda, Talo and Total. So I'm looking forward to that happening. I know Talo has made the commitment to invest $5 million USD, and yeah, we're looking forward to that growing. We're looking also forward to the mining sector growing a bit more, because the more there's more prospecting happening and there's more reserves for minerals being found as we go along, especially for strategic minerals, which will be very important for the energy transition.
Very good. Laura is hoping and praying. Are you also hoping and praying?
Of course, especially for my people in Turkana.
Bearing in mind that, you know, hope is a very bad strategy in planning.
Well, I think for me, and this is one of the biggest questions I always get when I land in Turkana, when do we expect to see the petrodollars coming in? And it's something year in, year out I have to, you know, explain the status of the country. But in the next 5 years, I know there's going to be increased growth. as well as right now the big question would be the energy transition. How do we then lobby for a private sector to also incorporate some of these changes into their project design, so that at least we see reduced emissions. And also I know for a fact that with the 4 billion, I think, stock tank oil in place in the South Lake Basin, if we actually get a strategic partner who can actually tap into more, then we can actually see more than the 585 million barrels of crude oil, hence putting us on the global oil map.
Very good.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning, and of course helping us with your insight. Your time is highly appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.